Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3, the middle of page 1346. What we learned yesterday, beginning on 1345, that Makol Hanal Yuvan, that after explaining the Yichud of Ma'u Ban, both above and below, both Oir and Yesh, the revelation of the divine, as well as it becoming part of the Yesh, the Ayin and the Yesh, meeting and joining, both in a Tzaddik, Lamayl Lamato, where the primary force is Oir, light, but it also transforms and deals with darkness, especially his feeling of sensing the lack and inadequacy that, in a sense, like he's a sinner, even though he's not a sinner, but relative to his high level of closeness, he senses how much more there's to do. And from a Baal Tshuva's perspective, is the other way around. It starts with darkness and distance, but it also has closeness because there's Shema, there's the Neshama at work, there's Torah Mitzvahs, there's the grounding, there's bringing the Eir into existence. So there's also a combination. So we have the joining of it all. So it says, but Kol Hanal will understand the central theme, especially of this third volume, which is the idea of Laila Kiyom Yoyer, that day, the night will radiate like day. And this is not referring to the light of the sun being so powerful that it radiates and illuminates the darkness, because that is temporary. It's not transforming the darkness, it's dissipating it. And transforming is what Havaya yilecha Olom, lo yilecha oid hashemesh le'er yamam. The sun will no longer be the source of your daylight, but Havaya will be Er Elam. So here's now Er Elam, both that Havaya, as he explains, Havaya is the level that's higher than time. That in Elokim, it will bring Er Elam a element of eternity. And he explained that this is not just, as I said, that the sun dissipates the darkness, but it transforms it. And in the form of Nitzchias, and Nitzchias, he explained the level of Ad. What is Ad? Adei Ad. On one hand, it means a limit. On the other hand, it means in that limit, it's infused with an eternity. That's level one. That's something that is connected to time, because you can't say eternity, as he explained, unless it's connected to time. Something that's completely beyond time altogether, beyond anything, you don't call eternal. It just is. It doesn't have a beginning. It doesn't have an end. Like the Pelech Hariman says, there are things that have a beginning, but they have no end because the Ratzon Hashem, God imposed or infused that defined entity, that created entity, with an eternity, with something eternal. However, that's not the highest level of Er Elam. The real high level, at the bottom of page 1345, is when Elokim itself, when time itself becomes beyond time. Like space becoming beyond space, like the space in the Aron, Ein Min Amida, the ark, that space and not space at the same time. And the same thing in time, like God showing Adam Arishan, all the generations, even though they didn't happen yet, and each one happens in their time, so they definitely have finite generations, defined generations, I should say, but he showed them all in one snapshot. And like the Arizal, who was able to understand in 1 hour something that would take 80 years to articulate. And like the Baal Shem Tov that saw the future beforehand as if it already happened. All these are examples of time and not time joining together. Really meaning that the creation of time is, from our point of view, it's a defined creation, there's past, present, and future. But from God's point of view, it's just another form of his infinite creation. So within it lies also element of beyond time within time. And not that the time remains, in other words, there's the finite element of time. You can take the finite and make it eternal, but he said that eternity is only in potential. It's not actually eternal. You can count the amount of time, even though you can say time can go forever from within God's power. But right now, it's 5,782 years from when it began. So you see there is an element of Gevul in it. And then there's that the Gevul itself is Bli Gevul, that the Zman itself is L'mayla Ma'azman. And he compared it to Yem Shekulei Aruch in the parentheses, and that is the meaning. The Elam Aloshan Nitzchias. So not just that it will be the light of the world, Elam also means forever. But this is a Nitzchias that the Zman itself will be Bligvul. Okay. So I'm going to continue reading now from the middle of page 1346, the line that begins Nitzchias Azman, a little down, lower than half the page down. And for those following along, you can just go to ayinbeis.com. You can follow the text. So now he's going to qualify. You're saying that it's coming from within time itself, like we spoke about the darkness, from within the darkness itself. But just like he said earlier, that too comes from a higher power. Remember, he said, even when you transform darkness from within, it's coming from Helam Atzmi. However, it's a Koyach Nelam, we don't feel it. That's why it's like coming from within. So similarly, he's going to say, the Pasuk itself says, it doesn't say it's coming from Elokim. It doesn't say Elokim itself will be eternal. It says it's coming, that Havaya will be Le'er Elam. It's coming from Havaya. Second. So Havaya is the Elokim. So he says it's coming from Havaya. That Havaya will radiate in a revealed way in the name of Elokim. Yeshlemer, so he says Yeshlemer, you can say Sheyesh b'zeh b'zeh fanim. There are two ways of how this Havaya will radiate in Shem Elokim. That's what he's going to explain now. What are the two fanim? Dehine. That which the sun today, presently, is the light of the day. Daylight comes from the sun, not from Havaya, from the sun. That's a level where light is dispelling darkness. That's not that darkness itself has been transformed to light, like we said earlier already. So the sun is a powerful force. It's a luminary. Without the sun, there'd be darkness on the earth. God created a sun, and the sun shines like shining a light in a very dark, in a dark room. So the light is dispelling the darkness, but it didn't transform the darkness. Because if you take away the sun, the darkness will return, like he said earlier on the previous page. However, the second half, that Lasid Lave, when it says Lo Yiyeh, where it says the sun will no longer be the source of light; it will be Havaya. He says, That's the chiddush. Because to say that because if you're saying the sun shines, so what do you say? What's the chiddush? What's the innovation that will happen in the future when Mashiach comes? So he says the chiddush is that it's not just a different source of light, that the light will be one that transforms the very darkness. So it's a qualitative difference, not just so it's not like now the sun shines and then it'll be Havaya that shines. But no, there also will be a different way that it transforms darkness, not just dissipates darkness. Who believes man. Like we said before about time, not that the time becomes eternal, that there's an outside force that's causing it to be forever, but the time itself is beyond time. And now he's going back. And this itself, this transformation also has two ways that it could happen. Two ways. The first way of transforming is through the revelation of Shem Havaya, that Havaya gets revealed. This means this is like the second level of the sweetening of the gvuras, of the severities, that the Eir comes in place of the light, of the darkness. Remember, we spoke about that the light comes and replaces the darkness. And the darkness becomes light. So it's a transformation, but it's from without, not from within. That's like the Oyer of Shema, like we spoke about Tzaddikim. The light of Shema comes, and it's powerful enough to transform Ban on the darkness. Beis, what's the second way of transformation? That the darkness itself is transformed to Oyer. The way it's in its root and its source, and the Helam Ha'atzmi, as we learned, the Helam Ha'atzmi, the root of the darkness. Did you guys lose me for a moment? Because I'm looking if the internet is stable here. Everything is good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Now, clearly, what he said here are the three levels. The sun shining is like the first level, where simply like the sweet water is more powerful than the bitter water, so it sweetens it, but it didn't transform it. Now there's a transformation, but one can come from Shema, Havaya, or it's coming from the Shem Ban, from the darkness itself. And there he clearly says Helam Ha'atzmi. For whatever reason, which I was wondering, on page 1345 on top, he didn't use the word Helam Ha'atzmi. He used Shoshe Mekeda Atzmi, which is the same thing, but now he's explicitly stating it. So I was wondering whether he means it's the same level, but clearly it is. So this is the level we learned about, that it's coming from within the darkness, not from the light. Havaya Chod Ushmaya Chod Canal. And this is Havaya Chod Ushmaya Chod. Now, because Canal on top of page 1345, he said Havaya Chod, the Yuchad the Ma'al Ban Lamato, Ushmaya Chod the Yuchad Ma'al Ban Lamailo, Oyeshem the Havaya Chod Ushamati Yuchad Ma'al. Okay, where he explained that Shmoya Chod, that these are the two levels. Havaya Chod is when the Oyer Shamati Yekamay Hamayla, and Shmoya Chod Shachesh Ye'er Mitzad Atzmei. Okay, so that's Havaya Chod or Shmoya Chod, like he explained the two different ways on top of page 1345. So we already have the answer to the question. When you say Elom, he said you can turn to, it could mean two different ways of explaining it. One is that Havaya is transforming Elakim, the Helam, the Ma Havaya is transforming Ban, or you could say Elam, that it's not Havaya is transforming it, but rather it's coming from within the darkness that's rooted in a level that's the Helam Ha'atzmi. And he's going to explain that too can be explained in Havaya, as we'll learn now. Continue learning. And delve into, look into what it says in Likutei Torah, and which mimer, lo and behold, the mimer that he was referring to earlier, that was the basis, save the B'ramasl ki b'yem hazeh yechaper, the mimer ki b'yem hazeh yechaper, which goes back to right here. He referred to it on page 1334. You may recall we learned about it at length with the tzur. So what does he say there in the tzur about the stone? The nikras hatzur, the crevice, or did I use the word? The indentation of the crevice, the womb. The cavity within the rock. So he said, the so now we're teaching Havaya, not Havaya as Gilui, but Havaya as Sur. as the rock, which we know is a concealed state, because the rock is like the flintstone, where it's a state of concealment, helam atzmi, like he said, the butzina de kardenissa, the hard or the concealed flame, fire, spark. The imken yesh lemer. So we see from that there's a higher level. Havaya that the Havaya here is referring to not as gilui, but as the root of the halam, of the concealment. The imken yesh lemer, says the Rebbe Rashab. So based on that, we can say shezel b'chinas shmoy ha'atzmi, shmoy echad, that this is the core name of God. Hainu shmoy hakol ba'atzmusei mamish. That this is not the Shem Havaya as a manifest in the Shtalshalus, which is a revelation. Havaya as Gilui, but now we're talking about Havaya as part of Hu Shmoy Echad. That's why he called it Shmoy, as Havaya is in a state of concealment. Shlugan Ken Shem Havaya, it's also the level of Shem Havaya, Rakshu Beloy Oisius Yudke. But it's Havaya without the letters of Yudke Vovke, because it's just the core concept of Havaya, not the way it manifests in revealed letters yet. Like it says elsewhere. Now, if I recall correctly, he spoke about Havaya without Oisius earlier too. I have to find where. I don't remember where it was. Maybe with a little Google search, you may be able to find it. I do remember he mentioned it explicitly, and it probably connected to this. Let me see if I can find it quickly. I don't think so. Shmoya Atzmi, yeah. Okay. Omar, and this is what we say, and this is what it says, that when you say Hoya Havaya, that Havaya will be that eternal light that will make time be beyond time, that the darkness itself will radiate. We're talking about a higher level of Havaya called Havaya Atzmi, Shmaya Atzmi. So basically, the two interpretations in Havaya. So you ask the question, isn't that itself that the darkness will be transformed coming from Havaya? So he said this, depending which level of Havaya. One interpretation, Taka, coming from Havaya, then it's coming from outside. The light is transforming the darkness from outside. And then there's Havaya Shmoya, which is the level of health coming. So it's a deeper interpretation. So that's how he answers that question. Okay. V'yesh lemer, you can say Eir Elam hu al derech keil Elam. When it says in the pasuk Eir Elam, the light of the world, or the eternal light, Hitaish Elam Nitzchi. So it's like it says Keil Elam. Shemavur b'mokem achar. When it says God of the universe, Keil Elam, the God of the universe, or also eternal God, either way, explains Mashakasav Keil Elam v'lei nemer Keil ha'elam. Why does it say God of the world? It says the God of God. Keil Elam, it should have said Keil ha'elam, the God of the world. It says Keil Elam, God of world, Keil Elam, hu sha'elam hu alakus mamish. Because when you say Keil ha'elam, you're saying he's the God of the world. So there's a world, and he's the creator, the God of the world. When you say Keil Elam, you're saying that the world itself is Keil. So therefore, it's like the transformation of the thing itself, not that there's a God that is illuminating or creator of the existence, but it's the world itself is alakus mamish. And so too, you can explain Eir Elam. That it's not just the light that radiates the world in the world, that the world itself has become a light, a revelation. That the darkness itself has been transformed to light. This is the meaning that the night will shine and illuminate like the day. Shalayla atzma. The night itself, that the night itself will become light on its own. And what it means on its own, let's just spell it out. That's the epitome and personified by a Baal Tshuva who did not have a revelation or an epiphany, but that from the darkness itself came to a level of distress and a cry that brought him or her to a place of to coming closer to God. So even though he has a neshama and all that, but it's been completely concealed, but it's the darkness that brought him there. And that darkness, therefore, reveals something that light can never reveal. Because if darkness did not have this deeper dimension of the divine, the question would be, well, how could darkness lead him there? Once he's lost, he's lost. You need someone to show him the way. But since the darkness originates from the divine itself, the Helam Atzmi, so it has within that, it has the power to be able to hit rock bottom or to hit a state where the darkness itself will be the catalyst for his return, for his awareness. See, awareness can come from light and awareness can come from darkness, basically. And this we're talking now is the deeper awareness from the darkness, which is ultimate dira b'tachtenim, the transformation from within. I remember when the Rebbe spoke, Hishayin Rabba Tovshim Mem Daled, and when he was crying out loud about that Golus is completely not logical, that a Jew should be in Golus. Doesn't make any sense why a Jew should be in Golus. Why is there, after all these years, we should already have the Geula? And the Rebbe said then, between his tears and his cries, he said, the only thing you can say is maybe because God wants us to cry with an emes. And if there was even one explanation what the Maila, the quality of Golus would be, we wouldn't cry with an emes, because we would say, oh, you know what? There's some redeeming element to it. But the fact that you don't find anything redeeming, it's completely darkness, complete despair, complete illogical element of darkness that is so dark, that itself causes that a person should cry out with an emes. So there you have a perfect example. Why then is he crying? It's not coming from any revelation. There's no quality in it. You know, some people say that you can apply that. The Rebbe said a similar thing that year on Nasara B'Tevis about why Yaakov was not allowed to reveal the Ketz when Mashiach would come to his son, to his children, because they had to come from them. There shouldn't be anywhere that it comes from outside of them. So some explain Gimel Tammuz and our whole situation now. When the Rebbe said, I did everything I can, now do what you can, that it has to come from within. It cannot come from even one glimmer of something outside. It has to be a state where there's complete darkness, and that's what causes one to cry out with an emes. Just another way of explaining part of this. So this is what he just said here about the transformation from within. Okay. I'll stop here if anybody wants to ask anything. So let's move to the next paragraph, a little introduction. He's taken us now back literally to page 1207, which is the first page of volume 3. At the bottom of 1207, where it explains Ein Oid. So now we have Havaya Elokim, Ein Oid. Remember, Ein Oid comes to add that Elokim itself will radiate, not through Havaya Hu Elokim. Not that Elokim, the concealment, will be an expression of the revelation, or concealment in order to reveal, but Elokim itself is going to reveal something. The very concealment, the very darkness, the very Keli is revealing now the Shmoya Atzmi, the Helama Atzmi. So he's literally going back now, 1207, we're now 1346. So that's 140 and 39 pages. Right, 1207 to 1346. Yeah, 139 pages. He's now going to conclude what he began there. And this is what he says. V'zeu gamkein einoid. Zeu gamkein inyan einoid. This is also the inyan, the idea of einoid, taking us back to that pasuk. V'yadaita yom, let's go back to the pasuk. V'yadaita yom, you shall know today. Today refers to day and night. Simtsum and gilui, helam cheshach and helam cheshach and gilui, and oyer cheshach and oyer darkness and light. V'yadaita yom v'hashavesa levavecha, and you shall integrate it into your heart. Ki avayu alakim, that avaya gilui, hu alakim is one with the darkness, and they connect together. B'shamayim imal above, shem ban umal above, va'oretz metachas below, the world below. And then he adds einoid. What does he add einoid for? And this is a question that goes back to page 12, to page volume 2. He asked that question in volume 2. I'll tell you exactly what page, the Shavuos Maimer. So really this takes us back all the way to Shavuos. Let's see. He has that question on page 997. If you go back to 997, the Rebbe Rashab asked that question. What is the addition of Ein Oid? And he says, as the Yichud of Shem Elikim Atzmai. He said at the end of the paragraph on page 997. So we're talking about quite a while back. Now he's coming back to that here. So he says that Amar Sha'amar Azal, Afila B'chalole Shalela. What does Einoid add? That this Yichud of Havaya and Elikim is even B'chalole, in the cavity, in the space, in the empty space of the world. So it's interesting. The Medrash essentially saying that Einay is telling you also in this, in the Chola Elam, we call it the space of the world. Yeah, the space of existence. That's where Einay is. He brought that. That's a Medrash that was cited on page 1210. He brought it for Chalol Shalelam, which he said then is that it's Tzimtzum and the Shimu. So now we're going to understand what Einoid comes to add. V'hainu, Aches Sha'ama, after the pasuk tells us this same verse in Veschanan, which we always read Shabbos Nachmu, Shabbos after Tisha B'Av. He says this verse that after he says the Havayu Elikim, remember the Idaitayim v'Shabbos Alecha Havayu Elikim, Shuzeu, that's referring to Shashem Havaya, that the name Havaya Meir Begilui b'Shem Elikim, that the Shem Havaya should radiate in a revealed way in Shem Elikim. That's the second level of sweetness. That's the second level. That's where Havaya, the power of Havaya to transform darkness, but it's coming from the Havaya, Shema. V'hu al yedei hepech hatzimtzum v'hester, the Shem Elikim, hepech hatzimtzum. That's by transforming the tzimtzum that we learned at length. You transform the tzimtzum through transforming your animal soul and through transforming your life. The tzimtzum and the concealment and the covering of Shem Elikim, of the name Elikim, liyas keli le'er, that instead of it being concealment, it should be a container, a channel of light, for light. Sha'idei zehu, shemeir b'Shem Elikim gili er Shem Havaya kamoishu be'etzem. Through this process, will radiates in the name Elikim, will radiate the revelation of Havaya the way it is in its core. So instead of concealment, the Havaya is now permeating and radiating into Elikim. But however, the kol zeh hu b'chinas ha'eres v'agiluyim de'er ensof, shu be'erech b'chinas ha'kelim. All this is the lights and the revelations of the infinite divine light, which is be'erech b'chinas ha'kelim. That's commensurate to the containers. So you have eres in kelim, Havaya in Elikim. However, so what is the what's the chiddush? What did you accomplish? You accomplished was this: that on its own, rak b'shemislabish b'kelim, that which manifests in the containers on their own, hu shebechinas miyad v'tzimtzum. The light was diminished and concealed and concentrated. As the light comes through a number of garments and sheets, and number of partitions, and a number of garments and shrouds. As we learned at length above. What did we learn in volume 2? All about the parsois of how the light gets concealed, b'kamet tzimtzumim. What changed? It says, what will change is through Havaya, by the hipuchat tzimtzum, the shem elikim. The chiddush here is in this level of Havaya elikim, not yet einoid. We're not yet at einoid. Transforming the tzimtzum means the work we do in refining ourselves. As we spoke about mutva, murgish, muzmal, as we climb the ladder in personal refinement. So we expand our containers. So like a student, in the beginning, the student knows a little. As he works on himself, his mind gets expanded, his whole being gets expanded. So through transforming that tzimtzum, the shem elikim, you won't get the Havaya that comes in a narrow tzimtzum, concealed way. You're going to get the light as it is in its core, but it's still the light of Havaya. It's still Gilui. Now, what's the chiddush of Einoid? However, now he adds, after saying Havaya Lakim, which is the chiddush is, that through your yediyah, through your mind, and in your heart, you expanded your containers to receive the divine light, but there's something more than that. Next comes next page, 1347. Now we're not talking about Shem Elikim as being a container for Shem Havaya. The very container itself, the very concealment itself, the container itself will become a force of revealing godliness. Not revealing Havaya of the Gili, but revealing the Shmoya Atzmi or the Helama Atzmi. And this is a that's much higher. From the light of Shem Havaya. That's the addition. And this is the meaning, the deeper meaning, when you say Einoid, even in the cholol of the world, not just that the space of the world will reveal the divine light, but the very space itself. Like we learned earlier, remember Mokim Osi, Mokim Iti, rather. Mokim Iti, that this is the Mokim of the cholol, the space of the tzimtzum, which is the Reshimu. That very concealment itself will become a force of revelation. And what is that rebel? B'sharshe in the root, in the root of the Rishimu and the Chalal is that the Helama Atzmi, that which is fundamentally concealed and not subject to revelation, that itself will become revealed. So it's not only greater light. The first one, you expanded the containers, so you have now greater light all the way to the Etzema Eir. It's also qualitative, but it's still in the world of Eir. Now you've reached the world of Helama Atzmi, the divine that's completely beyond revelation. And this is also transformation of the Tzimtzum, but not through Eir. This is V'zeu de Hipuchacheshech, Shenepech Mitzad Atzmai. The darkness that was transformed on its own from within, L'Eir, to light, V'yesh Nasa B'chinas Ayin. And the Yesh itself, the very substance, the very ego, the very identity of existence has become identityless, has become Ayin, has become sublimated, and a state of Ayin, of nothingness, as in non-substance. Substance itself has become beyond substance. Like we said before about Tzaddikim, where you reverse the whole process to make from Yesh into Ayin. This is, of course, the level of Tshuva, not Tzaddikim. Shezeu ha-bitl de ein oid, and this is the bitl, the final bitl of ein oid. Not just the bitl of Havaya Elikim, Ein Oid, Shu B'chinas HaYesh Dafke Keneda. That takes place dafke in the yesh. When you say Ein Oid, we're talking about in the yesh itself, the element of Ein Oid.
But this is the Gevurah one, the third one.
You mean the third level of sweetening the Gevurahs? Yes, this is the third level. That's why we say Ein Oid milvadei, nothing else but him. Okay, Ein Oid, there's nothing else. Let me explain. I think I'll add an additional point to this. As long as you don't transform it from within, remember we said earlier, if you transform it from without, then something within Cheshach itself remains unredeemed. The very darkness, the very despair. You can say that despair was, you read the Tzorech Aliyah, that the despair or the distress was in order to reach a place of revelation, of redemption. But still, that 1 second that a person cried, that a person was sad, that a person felt lost, will that ever be redeemed? So to say that it will be redeemed because it led you, like saying the tears, those that sow in tears will reap in joy. So the tears led you to joy, no problem. It redeemed the tears. But the moment that you cried and you did not feel redemption, that's not fully transformed. They say Ein Oid, you're saying the very darkness, even that 1 second of loneliness, that 1 second of existential despair is also redeemed because the Helam HaAtzmi is revealed through that. So it's like saying the deepest way of experiencing God is not just the revelation that comes from darkness and the revelation that transforms darkness, but that the very darkness itself is a godly creation. And that godly creation is Ein Oid, Dafkin the Yesh, Keneda, as it's known. By Deizeh, and through this, who Gili B'chinas HaHelam the Ein Sof. Through this reveals the power of Helam. Like in Atzilus, where everything is revealed, even though it's not the highest level of revelation, because it's in the spheres, it's in a structure, or in time of the Beis Hamikdash, it's a revelation of the divine. So what you know from that is that God has the power to reveal himself. It is only darkness that teaches you that God is not defined by revelation, that God has the power to conceal himself. And the concealing is such an adepta Helam the Ein Sof mamish. That's so darkness reveals a power that reveals to you that God is not defined by revelation and by expression and by structures and by all the parameters of revelations. As we learned earlier, so it reveals an inyan atzmi that's higher than revelation. So ironically, pain and suffering ultimately reveal something about God that joy and celebration does not reveal. And still we don't want it because we do want to transform it. We do want to reveal the divine within it. We don't want to experience the pain. We want to experience the divine power of concealment, not the pain aspect of it, which is that's what will change. In other words, we won't remain in pain, but we'll see where it originated from, God's ability of power of restraint and power of concealment. It's very heavy stuff here. What can I say? Okay. Any questions? And now, he's going back to step 2. And just to ground it, he says clearly, now. That second level of sweetening, which is what? That that through the darkness gets transformed through not through cheshach, which is the second level of sweetening that we learned earlier. Don't think that it's a superficial or a type of surface level transformation. It's also bitl of etzem etzias hayesh. You're transforming the very existence of the darkness. It's not just like the first level. The first level, you can say you're simply outnumbering the bitterness with sweetness. So you haven't really changed anything. If a person, let's say, has a cup of bitter drink, and then you poured so much sugar and sweetening in it, without touching the bitterness, it just simply outnumbered it. So that's why it's sweet now. But you didn't in any way change the bitterness. In the second level of sweetening, you have changed it. And not only that, the only thing that's lacking is that it's not the bitterness itself has been changed. It's a force outside that has changed it. However, in the second level, the power came from Shema. It's such a powerful power that it could transform from Ayin. It came from Ayin into the Yesh. So it transformed the Yesh. However, the third level, the Ikar Inyan Einoid, the Ikar primary thing with Einoid is a deeper transformation. Hu Masha Yesh Mitzad Atzmei, that the Yesh on its own, without the revealed power of Havaya, without the revealed power of Shema, Nasa B'chinas Ayin, came to a state of Ayin. Not that the Ma came from Ayin to Yesh, but the Yesh on its own came to a state of Ayin. Shazeo mi Yesh la Ayin. It's not going from Ayin to Yesh, it's going from Yesh to Ayin. Liyez b'chinas Ayin Mamish. That's Ayin Oid. Ayin Oid. That the Yesh Mamish is becoming Ayin. So I think the word Ayin Oid is also Ayin. Ayin, like Ayin has the letters Ayin. I think he may be hinting to that as well. So it became Ayin Mamish. And this reaches into the core of Ein Sof. Not into the Eid Ein Sof, but higher than the core of Ein Sof. For who Maila Shem Ban, and this is the quality and the virtue of Shem Ban, which refers to Behemoth, to the Yesh. Sheyir la'osid, la'mayla m'shema. That the future will be higher than Shema, than the name of Ma. I'm going to stop here, not because I would like to continue reading, but I want to give it more time to digest and register, because now he's going to tie together the last pieces of the puzzle of everything we learned till now. Because the next paragraph, as you see, he's going back to the Magid. We're talking now 500 pages back. So he's literally summing up the last 500 pages now, but also summing up the last 50, 60 pages as well, as he ties together everything, the Einoid, in this higher level of transformation. So this is, as I said yesterday, this is like a real siyum we're making here, because even though the Ayin Beis is not over yet, but he is tying together really hundreds and hundreds of pages. And I'm thinking about probably the last 4 years of our learning, if not more. Probably 4 years of our teaching and learning here is coming together now. So it's quite an awesome moment. So I'm going to stop here before V'zeu V'yitin Eis L'Malkei, which is going to take us back to page 1299. I'll review that tomorrow, but I'll stop here. But I would love to, if anybody wants to ask anything or clarify anything.
Great, we get to see him in the 9 days.
Yeah, tonight it begin the 9 days, right? Exactly right. No comments? I mean, this is really unbelievable stuff. Unbelievable.
Well, it's basically the same as yesterday, except the concept of Ein Od was defined.
That's good news. It is continuing. This is a flow. He's bringing the word Ein Od into the picture, but it's like, and he's tying it all together. Yeah. So if no questions, I will stop here by the word B'Shema. Ban is higher than Shema. And when you learn the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer I refer to, L'Sovet Tzadikai B'Tiyufta, it's also quite fascinating how the Rebbe Rashab is explaining that Maimer, because that Maimer is quite intense, but there's a lot, the Ayin Beis really clarifies many, many points. Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording here at the middle of the top of page, first section on page 1347.